Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Welcome, Chargers. We're glad to have you back again this week for another great guest. I tell you, it's really interesting when we listen to different people and their perspectives and how they got to where they're at in life. Remember, I talk about your Chargers on this podcast. That means you create habits around real goals every day, and then you want to go out and accomplish those. And what I do is share different guests that will help you in that process. All you have to do is sit there, listen, take notes, and then decide what you want to implement in your life. And I think you're going to really enjoy our conversation today, because our guest today is going to give us a different perspective on how we can look at things. Bill Woolsey is the president and founder of FiveTwo. It's a network that equips faith-based leaders and entrepreneurs to launch a variety of sustainable startups and nonprofits. Bill began leading FiveTwo in 2015 when they launched a Mother Teresa meets a friendly Mark Cuban training process that helps entrepreneurs to grow nonprofits and startups that make a difference in financially sustainable ways. Bill, it is great to have you on the Charge Podcast. Welcome.
Gary, thank you so much. It's great to be here with you and with your audience.
Well, I am so excited about this conversation because I love entrepreneurs and I love nonprofits. And the thing is, I think we all find out in life, and I just recently had a birthday, and what we find out is really success is great, but really we make a difference when it's significance. And I see that's what you're doing with your organization now. So will you share me a little bit of the story of how you got to this point? Because of course it's normally not a straight road. Normally it's got some obstacles and challenges that go with that. Share that story with us.
There's some dips and valleys and mountain peaks and train wrecks and whatever metaphor you want to mix in there. So I've been a pastor, Gary, since 1987, was always the guy who was in charge of helping grow the congregation, was in large churches, multiple roles, started a whole bunch of things and saw some phenomenal success and growth. And then my family and I were asked to start a church in West Houston in 97. And that became an incredible ride for my whole family. We grew from 7 families, 16 to 1,600, 3 locations, and really approached it almost from a business standpoint. We did a large staff start right out of the gate. In the process, having done all that, realized it's really hard to start things. And you're going to have failures. And people would say to me, well, how did you do this? And one of them was, I didn't ever try to start a church until 9 years of being a pastor. And we'd get guys out of seminary go, I'm going to go start a church. I'm like, okay, but so what we realized in that was, how could we help, especially church planters at first, be more effective, find the camaraderie and the practical tools they needed that they weren't taught in seminary. Well, that was 2009. And then about 2012, we started going, the secret ingredient that's hidden here is not just entrepreneurial pastors, but it's entrepreneurial Christians in general. And if we could mobilize those people to where whatever they started, they would bring Jesus with them rather than leave him home, we could really see some wonderful progress in communities and in culture because of this forgiveness and mercy and compassion that are so central to Christ and his church. Man, that'd be cool. So that's where we were. And like you mentioned, in 2015, we really morphed into this training. We took everything we kind of learned over the years, put it into our training. We did that face-to-face for 6 years. COVID hit. And now we've got it all online, but we're also back now post-COVID in some face-to-face relationships. And so, so it's just a heart for for people who are starting and a heart, they want to incorporate their faith into it. And how could we help them be sustainable and successful so they don't waste a lot of time and money?
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing we're seeing in business today is so many business owners thought they had to have them separate. And I think we're finding
Yeah.
out that,
Yeah.
actually you can be a distinction on one way or another. And yes, you're going to repel some people if you bring it in.
That's
But
right.
if you want to truly be your authentic self, just like Jesus was, you have to bring that forward in your life. I do that with my speaking. And of course, I tell people, I'm not telling them that's the way they should live. I'm just telling this is the way I live. And I think that's what's so important. And I think that's really where I want to start with is really how can leaders really look at the importance of incorporating their mission into their leadership and as well into their business of who they truly are?
Well, Gary, it starts with your personal calling. And again, Christians at times, I think, reserve that word calling for if I'm a professional church worker. And we want you to understand, God's wired you a certain way. Psalm 139, you're incredibly made. He knows all of that about you. And especially this entrepreneurial population, who there's only about 12 to 14% of the US population is entrepreneurial. So you're a pretty unique bird, and you innately know how to start stuff. Matter of fact, if I ask you how you did it, you probably can't totally tell me how you did it.
Right.
And so what we want you to understand is this calling, and it's what's incorporated into your calling. Obviously, it's your faith, who your God is, who you're serving. But then this other big important thing is what is important to you? What are the values that you hold dear in your life? And those are usually a product of emotions, experiences, events of people. And your values flow out of all that. Well, they get carried with you autonomically. They're subconscious, but they're very real. People join organizations, they join causes based on values. So when you as a leader are aware of your calling, you're aware of what's important to you, your values, then you can actually start to articulate more clearly the culture you want to see in your venture. And values and behaviors are joined at the hip. So you can start to understand why you don't like that behavior in your employee, or why that's, and that clarity becomes so powerful. And it also becomes very personally rewarding. So that's when I talk to people who want to incorporate more of their faith into their work. They understand it's not siloed. All of life is sacred. How do we do that in ways that cause people to lean in instead of repel them? There's some art to that, but over the 30 years of doing this, and that was always my job, it's been fun to kind of now at this stage in my life go, okay, here's how you do it. And it's not rocket science, but you do need to be clear about your calling and understand what's important to you, because that's kind of the foundation.
Well, it really comes down to is we're following that leader. Just like if we go back to the Bible, he called the unqualified, really, right, but they were willing. And that was the key. Well, today, really, we're in the fall of 2021, but the challenge that we're having is getting people, right? Hiring right now for businesses is it's crazy. I mean, that's the only word I can use. I've been in business 30 some years and I've never experienced it at this level. It's always tough when the economies are good and things of that nature, but it's experience. But what you're talking about is by calling, you're really setting up your purpose as the entrepreneur and business owner of really letting people really attract to that and really see that they can now bring those two together, where I'll be honest, in a lot of places, you have to separate those two, and you can really separate yourself out as an employer in this area. And I'm not saying by taking advantage of it, but as your calling is to help the greater good. That's what we're called to do as entrepreneurs and business owners, is to help the greater good.
Yeah. And it's this interesting relationship between joy and purpose.
Yeah.
And, people in general are always looking for hope. That's why Christianity is so powerful. is that it offers a hope that is real and eternal. Well, that's also tied into joy. And when you're looking for that joy, we're working with a landscaping company right now. This is a single owner, and he's had incredible success. But he literally said to me, "I'm not happy right now doing what I'm doing because he's out of his element. Right? It's growing around him. He's in chaos. He's confused. He's fuzzy. He's got conflict with staff because there's poor definition. So we're helping him really get back to his roots, understand who he is, who he's not, and how does that play out then with he's a strong Christian philanthropist. And how does that live itself out? Not just in the sense that, well, my company's going to make a donation every year, but what about his staff? How does his staff experience this compassion, but strength from his faith? And so, yeah, you're spot on. And when you mentioned earlier legacy, right? What's the legacy you're leaving? Had a dear friend once who said, Bill, I've built a lot of businesses, and I came to realize that as soon as I sold a business and somebody else owned it, there is no guarantee. And so my legacy is not the businesses I built, it's the people that I poured into. And I think that just really helped me as well.
Yeah, I think that's key because it's about people, and you take it back to people. And today, what we just talked about, the challenges, it's go back to those people, the people you make a difference with. And if you work through your values, as we've talked about, is why they're so key, because then when you set them up, I think that's the key that you talked about is we have to know what our values are, because basically then it gives us the boundaries. We know what we're working in, and we know when we fall out ourselves. I mean, that's the whole concept behind it. What do you think when we've talked about values and how we incorporate that leadership in, when we really look at some of the key ingredients now, bringing the team into it, and you're trying to create that successful team? What are some of the key ingredients that you see to really get that successful team?
Well, first of all, I would ask you the question of how are you, you can use the word strengthen, you can use the word improve or building. How are you building relationship with your people? Okay. And, routinely in scripture, the key ingredient in building relationship revolves around hospitality. And matter of fact, a huge study was done through Barna on Christian households and what makes Christian families Christian. Okay. And what are those behaviors? And they all flow back to hospitality issues. Like, do I invite strangers into my home? Do we eat together? How do we just fellowship together? So I would say to you, as you're building your team, what is that fellowship aspect? What is that food, relational component? Is it consistent and regular? Is it on a calendar? That kind of thing. The second thing I would really stress to you is communication. And like our staff is all deployed. Okay. So we have to work hard, but we use some cool tools, Asana, Slack, texting for certain purposes. We try to be in front of you video all the time we can, so that this communication is not just words or reading an email where emotions are, who knows what the heck he's saying. So that communication is very important. And I go back again to regularity, frequency. What does that look like? I was just reading, I don't know if it was Wall Street or where it was the other day, that this new role, no, it was Bloomberg, the new role is vice president of deployed engagement or something like that. It was like this brand new role of managing remote teams. Okay. And how do you do that well? And how do you keep them all on board? So again, we've got this hospitality issue of building relationship. You got communication, but I go back then to the first thing we talked about on your calling and your values. What's important for you as the leader is that anytime you're in a meeting with your staff or board or whomever it is, one thing you've got to make sure you're always doing is help people understand what's important around here. Okay. And you're always doing that, maybe formally through a session on the front end of the meeting, but for sure informally as conversations are happening. So you're building the team around cause, All right. What's the cause that you're about, especially you're a nonprofit, church-based, but what's your cause? And then what is this calling that's helping drive that, our communication, and how we are growing as people in our relationship. I would really stress to you those three things.
Yeah, that's excellent. Really, the hospitality, the communication, and understanding, your calling and values of what those are. Because really, in your leadership is when they recognize it is when you're in your greatest challenges.
And again, I can't stress enough the importance of values. And when people join, there was a huge study done probably about a decade ago now on somebody who's not a Christian stepping into a church and how long it takes them to decide if they're coming back. Okay. Versus a Christian. Christians who look for new churches, they go church shopping. They compare the list. But those brand new customers, if you want to call it that, who don't know anything about it, they step in, they decide within a minute. Okay. Because it's all feel, it's all sensing, and that's culture, that's values, that's the people they see, the smiles on the faces, or how they, so that's why it's so important for you as a leader to get a handle on that culture and the values that are driving it that you're trying to create, because it's critical to your cause. It's just really cool when you see it start to work.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's interesting you bring up culture there, because that's kind of my topic is positive culture and how do you create that? And really it's about being your authentic self. I'm going to go back just a little bit, if you don't mind, Bill, because I think it really touches on something as entrepreneurs. And I know I've got a group of entrepreneurs that listen to my podcast pretty regularly. I want to go back to this is if they've not really brought it into their business. They've, of course, tried to live by it, but more of the underneath side, not being really open about it on that part of it. How, as a leader of that organization, can they really now kind of expose and say, I want to live on these principles and these values that we've spoke about, to bring those forward to really help them? And maybe they do have that greater cause that they know they've really thought about. They've got a greater cause than just making profit. It's no longer that. They're really trying to move from that, what I call success, to now that significant side that they want to make a difference to people, and it may be other entrepreneurs. It may be a third world thing that they want to do, whatever it is. How do they move forward to really kind of put themselves in that position and really kind of get the staff to buy into that?
To really bring their faith more out in the open, in a sense. Okay.
Yes, that's it.
So I do think you have to be obviously wise and cautious in how you're doing this in our culture today. And I think, but it all goes back to 1 Peter 3:15 and 16, where Paul says, always be prepared to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do so with gentleness and respect. So my encouragement to you as a business leader, entrepreneur, as you're seeking to live out your faith more openly, effectively, to really make sure you've got a humble spirit of gentleness and respect. Respect, understanding not everybody believes like you believe, okay? And I'm assuming you're not going to be saying, for you to work at my company, you got to be Christian, all right? Which would not be even Christian,
right?
From that standpoint. Right. So I'm assuming you're not making that as a caveat, and that you're also, though, with this gentleness. So again, I was the guy who had to communicate Jesus to crowds and was very effective from an evangelist standpoint. But my posture was always one of, let me, I'm just going to point out Jesus, you decide. I'm not going to decide for you, okay? And I also would never do it in a way of, you're stupid if you don't believe this. So this whole posture of respecting people and truly loving them, regardless of what they believe or what they're going to say. If your team and your staff really understand that you do respect them, and you're simply being authentic and you're sharing yourself, most of them, if you're the CEO or you're the lead dog, they do understand in corporate America, you do get to call some shots, okay? You are the boss. And so there is some authority you have there. Is some freedom. I would say to you, it's how are you living out those Christian values? Are they seeing, and it's Ephesians 4, truth and love? Are they seeing both at the same time? Okay. And then what are those behaviors? How do you handle your anger? How do you process that with them? But then you mentioned earlier about the money thing. I mean, money's not the mission, but where there's no money, there's no mission. Okay. So where does money fall in it? They've got to provide for their families. That's why they're working for you. And so I have found that the one core value, it's a value of mine. It's one that I encourage people to adopt if they don't have, and that's the value of generosity. How are you as the leader showing generosity to your employees in grace, in income, and in profit sharing and incentives? What does that look like? So what you're really doing, going back to 1 Peter, you are creating a place where they want to ask you, always be prepared to give the reason for the hope that you have. They want to ask you about that because they truly are seeing a character that they wouldn't mind emulating. Okay. Now, my last word on this, and I know I could talk for days on this one. You've got to talk about Jesus somewhere. If you don't ever talk about Jesus, all they think is Bill's a great person, which doesn't do them squat. So at some point, and we have actually a mini course on this, on how to talk about Jesus in ways that are attractive and not repelling. And I would encourage you, if that's something you and your business are looking to do, reach out to us on our website through our links, because that right there, that's my heart. All right. That if I never mention Jesus, I'm really not, I'm missing out on something. So,
yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And really it comes down to model the way, servant leadership, which the greatest servant leader ever that walked was Jesus. And it's, we'll make missteps, we're not going to be Jesus. So we're not going to be perfect, and we are going to sin and we're going to fail, but being as that leader, being open and honest when you do that you did, but making sure you have those values and things in place that allows you to take that time that's there. And I think that's a great model that you really set up and shared there. I think you and I could have a conversation for quite a while.
We could talk a long time.
Because I just love this conversation, because I think that's what's missing in our world right now. And I think for not just business owners, and hopefully the people that were on here realize we're not just talking business owners. How are you doing this in your walk? If you can't be open and work, you have plenty of time. You impact people outside of work, and you're taking them to lunch, you're having those other conversations, and you can share that message. So I hope you're able to express that if you're not able openly in your business, which is a shame if that's the case. But maybe then that's part of your value system of what you look at, and you find a company that fits up to those values. Before we move on, would you share with them, of course, you mentioned it just a little bit about your website, because you got some great resources. I checked it out, how they can really connect with your organization, because if they're interested now, I don't want to wait till the end that they have to sit there and wait. Go ahead and share that information, Bill.
Sure, Gary. FiveTwo.com is our main site, FiveTwo, 5 loaves, 2 fish, FiveTwo.com. And there, one of the things we see a lot of people sign up for is our daily 2-minute multiplier. I write a devotion that's faith and work oriented every day of the week. And then also, though, if you're interested in learning more about turning your idea into reality, or you're looking at scaling and you're stuck, your business, your nonprofit is stuck a little bit, you can go to startnewtraining.com. That's all one word, startnewtraining.com. We've put all of our training material into a 12-module experience with short videos and everything training for you there. It's soup to nuts. We'd love to work with you. Our goal is to see new things start in the name of Jesus. And so any way we can help make that happen, we're excited.
Well, you all are doing some great work, Bill, and I truly appreciate you sharing that. Again, if you was exercising or doing something active, you weren't able to write that down, we'll have it all in show notes at chargepodcast.com. All you'll have to do is hit the link to be able to go there, and we'll come back to that at the very end and have Bill share them one more time for you. Bill, before I let you go, I ask every guest these 3 final questions. I call it kind of the recharge round that's there. The first question for you that I have is, I have that model, charge. That's my mantra. Create habits around real goals every day. What habit do you think's led to success in your life?
The habit of daily prayer, and it's not just a time, but it's really matured into a constant conversation. And so that habit of talking with Jesus internally, not out loud a lot of times, but aware of his presence has been phenomenal in my life.
Yeah. And that's just slowing down, giving yourself that time. It can be at any time. I took a little bit of time myself right before this podcast, just so I'm present and I'm aware with Bill. And what did I want to really come through this conversation and really ask God, what's going to come from that? Because there's somebody that needs to hear it. Maybe part of it, he was telling me I needed to hear it. So I appreciate that. The next one is, I've realized I like acronyms. It's SPA, and maybe you like going to the spa or not, but my SPA is a simple positive action. Of course, one of the habits you do is prayer, but what's a simple positive action you do to help yourself move forward each day?
Mine, most every day, so I'd have to confess that one, but that is some sort of exercise or exertion. Again, I've tracked this over the years, but that whole issue of chemical in your body when you're exercising, it actually creates a different attitude in your mind. It gives you a different outlook. And just doing something where I'm sweating, I've got the heart rate up. So one of the things I'm really big on right now, I've been doing is a 20-minute high intensity interval training, which I just love that stuff. It kind of like it's a challenge, So I would encourage that. How are you physically exerting somehow every day to get the endorphins, whatever they call those things, moving forward in your life?
Well, and that's the thing. And it's so hard for people to realize that does not do it, that it actually gives you more energy. And it helps you through everything, the challenges, even with relationships when something goes tough. If you've done some exercise and you've done your other habit of prayer, it's going to slow you down enough that those things won't be as big of crisis as you think they are in that point in time. Bill, we all have life lessons that we learn from. What was your biggest life lesson that you learned from?
I was just asked this the other day, Gary. Probably the one that I would say was, it was a train wreck of sorts for me, in that I was trying to move an organization, let's call it that, and getting them to be more efficient and to let go of a part of their ministry that they've had for a long, long time. What I failed to realize was all of the history that was there. And, we teach people that you never denigrate those who have gone before you, even if something was wrong there, because you're standing on the shoulders. If you're in a facility you didn't pay for, somebody else paid for that thing. Somebody else had the foresight to say, here's where we ought to be. So never denigrate those who go before you, but then also appreciate the power of leveraging that history, of harnessing that history for good, as opposed to for bad. So that was one of my biggest learnings. I've had a number of big ones, but that one really helped me appreciate how to be positive about the past, even though it's got junk in it. And even though your present may be broken, how can we take that positive, build on it for the sake of the future?
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, because I think we can always learn from each other when we have those challenges that come in each day. Now, Bill, share with them again how they can reach out, check out your website. Of course, you've got some tools, resources, some programs that they can check out. Where can they go to get all that information?
FiveTwo.com, FiveTwo.com, Gary, or startnewtraining.com. Training, blogs, articles there for you to share with your staff, resources, devotions, all sorts of things we have for you there for the faith and work entrepreneurial leader especially.
Well, check that out, because think about what Bill's doing, Chargers. 5-2. That's the 5 loaves, 2 fishes, and he's creating more abundance for every leader that's out there. For Christian people who want to show their Christian leadership, if you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to be able to share that, if you maybe want to start a nonprofit, you have a passion and desire there, that's the people they're helping. And think what they're doing each and every day. They're creating more abundance, more loaves, and more fishes for everyone to take in. I just love the concept, Bill, and just can't thank you enough for saying yes to the Charge podcast.
Gary, I can't thank you enough for inviting me. I'm always honored, and especially to be here with you. So thank you.
Chargers, I hope you've enjoyed that conversation. This is one of those conversations that needs to be forwarded to somebody else. So please, if you would, on your phone, you can go down before the final music goes, and there's 3 little dots there. You can share that right as a text message to a friend or a buddy, and I really would appreciate you do that. And I will tell you, I think they will appreciate it, because it's a message that maybe they are thinking, maybe they need to hear. And maybe if you're not sure, go ahead and share it anyway, because maybe that's the Holy Spirit moving you forward to tell you, go ahead and make that opportunity that's there. So Chargers, I look forward to coming back next week and having you here and with another great guest. And I thank Bill for joining us today. Remember, go out each day and charge, create habits around real goals every day. Make it a great day. See you next week.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.